Paulo, you founded OutSystems in 2001 and have led it since then as the CEO, bringing the company to a $9.5 billion valuation.
I was at the verge of bankruptcy about 3 times.
3 times? Not anymore.
No. It's good now.
Hey everyone, welcome to Dev Interrupted. I'm your host, Dan Lines, and today I'm joined by Paulo Rosado, CEO of OutSystems. Paulo, thanks so much for coming on the pod today.
It's a pleasure.
Great to have you here. You founded OutSystems in 2001 and have led it since then as the CEO, bringing the company to unicorn status, more than a $9.5 billion valuation in February. Amazing. But before we dig into that long journey, I want to give our audience a chance to know you a little bit better and about your background. So could you take us through your career path leading up to OutSystems?
My background is in computer science. I have a degree from a top university in Lisbon, Portugal. And then I went to the United States for a PhD/grad program, and I ended up by getting a master's and entering Silicon Valley work life. And I worked there for 4 years. Then I started my first company, my first startup in 97. I sold it in 99.
Wow.
Then I worked as an executive for a larger company, and then I decided to start OutSystems in 2001.
Just a few minor accomplishments. You got your degrees, you sold a company really quick. So a few questions for you there. You come from a technical background, but it seems like you were early on an entrepreneur. Like, how did that happen for you? Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Definitely not. When I was working in the Valley, I was lucky enough to be in a gigantic project that took about 18 to a lot of people. We were a very large engineering team. And this was when I fundamentally realized the issues of actually releasing code and maintaining code and getting specs, getting to change software in a way that was actually workable. And so the problem was so big, in my opinion, at the time that Java was coming out.
What year are we talking? This is 90s?
We're talking, in the 90s. We're talking 95 was when I saw Gosling presenting Java for the first time. And man, we did this huge project using the Java language, and it was just hard. And looking into the anatomy, then I started my company building and deploying some of the largest internet and extranet systems, like the first generation of cloud software.
That's cool.
And that type of software also has a lot of changes because it's impossible to get the requirements right up front. And so joining all of those experiences, the lack of productivity in the whole software development process is just appalling. And so that was the motivation really for OutSystems.
What was the company that you were working at? You were saying you were working in the Valley, right?
Yeah, Oracle.
So we're going to get into how you founded OutSystems, but I really wanted to ask you, since you're coming from a technical background, what were some of the experiences that led you to say, oh, there's a problem here? Is there anything that happened to you or anything that was like shocking that you knew, okay, something is wrong?
It's actually interesting because they all go back to the anatomy of technical debt and the difficulty of changing software. One of the realizations, for instance, in my career was the explosion of different languages and paradigms and the frameworks to be able to achieve one solution. And those languages were all dispersed with no connection between them. So only very sophisticated companies could actually track all the dependencies.
Yeah.
And the problem was that very early on, and this problem today is like huge, but at the time it was already very big, is that the moment you lose developers, the knowledge goes with them, because what they leave behind is such a high complex situation in terms of code and in terms of different frameworks that all of those dependency tracking, the intent that was there typically goes away. A lot of it was, my experience is that in these 3 phases of my life, I lost team members fundamentally. That took away like 20%, 30% of the knowledge of the systems. And a lot of, and reverse engineering what they have done required the supporting structure to have, to do what a lot of sophisticated companies do today. They invest a lot on coding standards, on very high level of constraints so that code can be transmitted even in developer erosion. And that didn't happen at the time.
What is the founding story of OutSystems?
It's exactly what I was telling you about. It's when we started this previous company of mine that was doing this very large internet project, we kept on failing. We kept on not delivering on time and on budget. And we used to, at the time, I still remember, we used to go back, man, we are smart. We're actually not bad. How is this possible? So we would go back to the requirements and say, we missed the requirements. We missed the scope is incorrect. And then we would try to enhance the scope and whatever. But the thing is that during those projects, we would realize that the business wanted to change. The environment was changing as we were developing. And the issue was that we're constantly accumulating debt during the project. When we reached first production, we realized that it was not what the users wanted. And then we had to go back and redo a bunch of stuff. And this, when we start realizing this was at the time, fundamentally, more than 90% of all IT projects in the enterprise had this type of phenomenon. They were always late, always over budget.
You always hear that, right? No, it always feels like it's late. Whatever the date that engineering says, you can add on time to it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what was interesting is that we started looking at the anatomy of that failure. Why is it failing? And we came up with this realization that the problem was not that the requirements up front were wrong. The problem was that the cost of changing wrong requirements, which are a fact of life, it's very high.
Yeah.
And so...
you can't predict the future. You're always going to have requirements that need to be adapted or inherently wrong, but that's just a natural building process, right? Everybody experiences.
Today, the Agile is mainstream, CI/CD is mainstream, DevOps are mainstream. But at the time, you have to realize that we're talking about building software the way you build a bridge, right?
Yeah, this is 98 or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. That the end of the 90s, when the internet exploded.
This is at your previous startup company. Is that when you're realizing all this? What was that company name?
It was named Intervento. It was a small company.
So this is when you're realizing, okay, there's a problem here. What happened to that company?
Oh, I sold it. I was someone wanted to buy it. We're talking about the bubble. And so we were a very hot asset because we had all these guys that understood the internet and it was a very new thing. So we got acquired by another company.
So then after that acquisition, I don't know, did you stay like, how did then you say, okay, it's time to leave, or what's the story post acquisition and coming into OutSystems?
I joined the acquire for 18 months. And at the time I joined the executive team and I met a lot of investors. This is when I started creating my network with venture capital and the investor crowd. And I had enough time to look back into the experiences of the past and realizing, my God, this is huge. And so me and my colleagues, we also saw a couple of trends accelerating. One was that the software, the business changes, the cycles of change were compressing at an exponential rate. And developers that already were difficult to hire were increasingly more difficult to acquire and hire. And so we saw that as a trend that was going to accelerate into the future.
Still happening now.
We didn't predict was that I actually didn't foresee that was that the amount of software produced was going to increase by a couple of orders of magnitude. I didn't realize that. But if you look into GitHub repos, you get like 100x more repos than you had. The fact is that shows that the amount of acceleration and the amount of software that's built today is huge. Still, the amount of software that's a lost opportunity is even bigger than that. And so there's this demand point that's gigantic with a huge problem of output and production.
When you founded OutSystems, so you had a successful business previous to OutSystems. You were acquired. You stayed at the acquire. Who acquired you?
A company called Altitude Software. They did call centers. Yeah.
Okay. You stayed there for a little bit of time, and then did you resigned or something? Hey, it's time to move on.
Yeah, I resigned.
Okay, you resigned. That happens often for founders. And then when you realize that there's this problem, okay, that you want to go attack, when you founded OutSystems, you called your buddies up, you did it alone, you used your own money, you got VC?
Yeah.
How does it work?
I had some people that had worked in my previous company, and we kept on talking about the failure rate and why it was so hard to build these portals and this UI, this user experience driven system. Why was it so high? So we kept on talking about that, and we came with the anatomy of what a completely new platform would be to facilitate that process. And that's how the OutSystems idea came about. We did a couple of prototypes. I had some top-level developers in the team, and very quickly we built a prototype. And then we went searching, and we actually closed 1 million euro at the time, 1 million euro funding in October 2001, so in 10, 11.
Did you have any customers when you closed that 1 million?
No, I didn't.
Nothing.
I was very frustrated.
Just had an idea.
I just had an idea. We had 3 customers that were willing to try it out. They really had this issue, and they were willing to bet if we had a shipping product. Yeah.
You know what I've learned? Because I have founded Linear B, my company. It's actually a similar story. One point that I found out, it's like, if you build something, you build a great prototype or create something, and you can pitch the vision, but you actually build something, there's going to be people out there that say, hey, I want to be a part of this. Here's €1 million. Here's $1 million. I believe in you. And I think most engineers sometimes think, oh, no, it's actually like this huge process and you have to have 1,000 customers and then you have to do pitching. And it's actually not to go build something and good things happen.
Especially today, right? You have to have trust in either you have to have trust in the market, or you have to have a lot of money.
Or you have to have a lot of money. Don't have a lot of money, but the developers, what you have is you can create something. Right. You can have a vision. You can build something. That's the advantage of having a computer science degree or being a programmer. You can actually go and build.
Correct.
So, question for you: you do not have a business degree, right? I didn't see that you had a business. You have a computer engineering and a computer science degree, right?
Yeah, correct. Correct.
Do you think it matters? Would you, if you could have changed, would you have gotten an MBA, or do you think you need like a business?
I actually took a lot of courses over the years, but it's a mixture of reading, listening, learning from advisors. And after a while, you start getting the knack for the things that you need to do from a leadership point of view and from a culture building point of view, all those important aspects, because the financial aspects of a company are pretty easy. So I think what computer science in a way and the technology acumen gives you and gives every entrepreneur and every leader is a capacity to predict the impact of the technology changes into market opportunities or business disruptions. And so when you see something and AI is going to take over the world, then you go and examine the process of AI, you realize, okay, where is the trade-off? Because there's no free lunches here. And so, and you realize and you can apply, okay, here we can go fast, here we need to develop a little bit more. So it gives you a little bit more insight to make good decisions.
So you just do that and now you have a $9 billion company. That's all it takes, right? Just, So you received 1 million euros at the time. So that's 2001. If I'm doing like some extrapolating, that's a good amount of money. That was nice. And you didn't have any customers, but you had a prototype. So what happens next after that? Okay, you received some money.
What happened is, remember that in 2001, that's when the bubble burst, right? So we were one of the last venture investments in technology in Europe.
Really? And, oh my God.
Yeah.
You sold your other business during the bubble, and now you started a new business right at the end, right? The burst. Wow.
Yeah. And so you can imagine that our business plan, we wanted to build up, get 3 to 10 customers with the first million, and then get another round of funding of about 5 to expand. And that all had to be canceled because there was not enough money. There were no 5 million available. And so we actually took the company to break even in the next three years. It was really tough. Wow. But it created a very frugal and a very pragmatic orientation towards the market and building something that customers really wanted. And then we had a lot of innovations with the company. For instance, the name OutSystems comes up with the realization that we believe that in about 5 to 7 years, all systems would migrate out of the data center. And the word cloud didn't exist. The word DevOps didn't exist. The word agile was something like only for crazy people. And we predicted all these trends at the time. And so we built for it. And so the product ended up by being very weird at the time. Now everyone copies and it's becoming a mainstream category. But at the time, it was very unique. Yeah.
How does it
Yeah.
feel to be in that position? You described it as weird, right?
We did, because, for instance, one of our third customer, we were selling, one of the things about these platforms is that you trade off speed and productivity for the domain, the scope of the domain. So there's no free lunches in this world. So we were targeting like portals that integrated with systems. So a particular type of use case for the enterprise that was very common today and at the time. And as one of the companies that bought our product was an SAP. So they had the ERP was SAP, and they built everything.
I mean, they're huge. SAP, you're saying the huge company.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the ERP, huge company and whatever. And these guys, it was a toll road company. They actually had the billing system, everything built on SAP. And they acquired the platform that were integrated with SAP. And they built a bunch of apps in very, very short amount of time. And they were like, oh my God, this is really cool. And then they came to us about 5 months later and said, listen, we have a big project here, which is a billing system. Can you guys build a billing system with this thing? We didn't really build a platform for that, but let's try it. And so with that customer, we didn't believe it was possible, but at the end of 5 months, they had a billing system. Just the customization of a billing system in a telco or it would take about 2 years at the time. And so rebuilding something from scratch in 5 months was huge. And so that's when we really had the validation that we had fundamentally compressed time to market by about, in this particular case, by 8 times.
Wow, that's incredible. In that situation, so you have a big customer coming to you essentially saying, hey, I need your help, or I want to try this with you. And you're saying, I don't know if it's possible, probably to yourself, but I need to try. Do you just go to your engineering team and say, hey, we need to try this and get this? Was it like a technical achievement?
I guess if I wasn't so desperate for money at the time, I would probably steer the way and concentrated on our smaller number of use cases, because that would have simplified the product. But the fact of the matter is the product took off in very mission critical situations, corners, and that's what made OutSystems as it is today, which is a low-code platform for mission critical applications and not for quick and dirty in the corner of a department. So that's why we develop all these realizations about what it means to build a very large system and then evolve it over 18 years. And taking over, addressing the technical debt issues, and maintaining this type of systems.
So people that are using OutSystems, you're saying SAP used it for their billing platform, right?
No, what I was saying is that this was another company that had SAP as part of their digital platform. And then they acquired OutSystems as a complement to SAP.
Gotcha. Are most companies that are using OutSystems, is it for internal apps that they're building it for inside the organization? Or is it external, like I want to create a consumer app?
Both cases.
So, what did you start with early on? Was it both still?
We started with external portals, typically. Portals and mobile apps at the time. Okay. And so we started with touch points, with UI-based touch points. And then later on, we introduced workflows, for instance, and we start getting more and more internal use cases. The moment you solve the problem of delivering applications that have a high standard of UX and UI, you can use them internally. Yeah. Because now internal apps have a little bit more leeway in terms of if UX demands, but if you already built for the external world.
I know that you've been CEO now. It's a 20-year journey, right? 2001, 2021. So I know there's probably been a lot of challenges, but if you had to think what comes to mind, what are the major challenges that you've had as being the CEO of OutSystems over the period of time?
I think maybe the biggest one was the fact that our timing was wrong.
Timing was wrong?
Yeah, it was
because of the bubble. You're saying the bubble bursting?
We were way too early in terms of the category. It took us about 12 years until Agile became mainstream, and Agile is a fundamental practice. We had DevOps in 2002 in the platform. No one recognized that the connection between dev and operations was.
Yeah, DevOps. I'm thinking like 2010 through 2020 is a DevOps craze, right? So you were early.
We were completely early, and the cloud mobile, mobile was the catalyzer for a lot of the demand for very fast change and fast delivery into everywhere in all companies, not only Google or Netflix or whatever, but the rest of the companies.
Yeah.
And that was about 12 years after 2001. And we were way too early, and we had to hold on doing a lot of missionary selling. We acquired a huge install base, but it was very hard, and it was spread all over the world at the time. But this was before the category actually became mainstream.
Did you ever think to yourself as a founder, hey, my company might not make it? Like OutSystems might go under? Were you ever in that situation?
In the past?
Yeah. Early on.
Of course. Yeah, of course. I was at the verge of bankruptcy about 3 times.
3 times? So not anymore.
No. It's good now, but
what did you do in that situation when you're I'm at the verge of bankrupt? That would, for some people, that could cause a panic attack.
Let's say the stress level was not very low. It's never been low. What happened right after is our business plan had a particular market, and the market collapsed, which were telco companies at the time. We had decided to go vertical, and that market collapsed. We had to change to the enterprise, and this is typical, right, of startups. You about 2/3 have to flip the business.
You got to pivot, evolve, right?
Yeah, you have to pivot. Correct. There was no option of not succeeding.
You have no choice.
We have no choice. We just have to go forward.
What do you think makes you a successful leader? Obviously, you're highly successful now. What do you think makes you successful?
I think a little bit of vision, maybe, and drive, and a fundamental notion of fairness and respect for the intelligence, for the minds of everyone, I think. The culture of OutSystems has a lot of that, which is a collective vibe of intelligence where we try to harness as much as possible. And that's why, for instance, in our culture book, our top rule is ask why. You need to understand why you're doing something, which provides a process in the organization across the leadership levels to pull why are we doing this? And so that creates motivation, that creates context. But that's also a respectful thing that you do with intelligent people, right? You need to give them the context so that they can make decisions autonomously. And I think part of the success of OutSystems comes out of the culture, curiosity, and the respect for everyone.
Why is the ultimate motive. If you're a smart person and you don't know why you're doing something, I'd probably quit that company. Like, it's boring. I don't know why I'm doing this. But employee retention is also a very important thing. We're going to get to that in a moment. What is going on with, so we talked about the founding story of OutSystems, and I'm sure there's been an evolution over 20 years of what OutSystem does. But what is OutSystems doing now? How have things changed over a period of time? So
the OutSystems sells a low-code platform. And fundamentally, what these platforms do is they have a combination of a visual development abstraction concept language that allows development to be done very quickly with very low learning curve, together with the application lifecycle management. And so in that sense, with CI/CD type of concepts all integrated so that you can build something from idea to production very quickly, and you can change very quickly. What has changed is that the requirements, especially with COVID, we saw a huge acceleration in digital transformation. And so every enterprise now has become a cloud software company, fundamentally. And you have to build a cloud software company. You have to build cloud-ready products in a way. So portal services, integrations, leveraging SaaS, leveraging systems that already exist. And you have to do that in a very short amount of time and with very limited amount of people and skill sets. And so it's a huge problem for a lot of companies. And so innovation comes out of building their own software that's unique, not buying something that everyone has. Yeah. So the fact that you cannot build these things, or everyone that you have is now worried about managing technical debt, fundamentally stifles innovation.
Absolutely. If I were to ask you companies that use OutSystems, or a company that might be interested in using OutSystems, would I be thinking speed? Like, I want to develop fast? Is that, because you mentioned that earlier, it was like, oh, I was able to build this system in 6 months as opposed to 2 or 3 years. Right. Is speed still the primary?
Speed is always the first attribute. It's immediate gratification. That's what everyone wants. But there is a trade-off to that, which whenever you build something with a platform like this that has a lot of automation into it, the trade-off that you take is, do I have enough power to build what is needed?
Yeah.
And so that's the thing about these platforms. And the second one is, do I have the non-functional requirements of security, high scalability, performance, response time, and whatever? Does the platform has those requirements in all applications that I build? The final pillar, I would say, that people care about has actually to do with this notion that with the tool that allows you to build so fast, the cycles of change are going to be compressed. You can basically build a change in OutSystems. You can do changes in every 1 hour, which basically after 1 month, you have hundreds of changes, right? The moment you increase the frequency of changes, you increase the frequency of the probability of debt being created. Each change is an opportunity for creating debt. And so with platforms that are compressing time, you get an accelerated problem of debt. And so one of the things we do is we look into the anatomy of debt and try to curb it. We don't remove it completely, but we try to curb it as much as possible.
We know that's happening in the industry is moving fast is better in general. Everyone wants to move fast. We talk about cycle time. How quickly can I make a change? If I'm making a change in 1 hour, I would think in general, that's a very good thing, or most companies want to be able to do that. Now, what you're saying is that will also incur a technical debt. I know that you've brought it up a few times, technical debt. It's an important topic. You recently published a report titled The Growing Threat of Technical Debt. So what is going on in technical debt right now?
What's happening is that because most companies now have realized that they have to build things. They can not only buy stuff, they can buy services from the cloud, but they need to couple them together. They need to create compound services and unique APIs and unique UIs, unique portals, unique mobile apps. So there's a fair amount of code and software that you need to build, because today there's a lot of capabilities to start very quickly, but as changes accumulate very quickly also, you start creating legacy. And because the paradigm, the attributes of technical debt start kicking in. And in this survey, we actually asked about 500 companies, what was, in their opinion, what was the fundamental reasons for technical debt? And they talked about too many development frameworks. Second one is developer erosion, so developer leaving, attrition. And third one is compromises in quality of architecture and the code to be able to meet the deadline. And so it's a hack, right? They did a hack to just release the software quickly. And those hacks compound into technical debt. But if you look into these three things, those are fundamentally the issues that we solve with the OutSystems platform. It's a problem that as you build things and technical debt compounds, you start having increasingly, instead of running forward, you just keep running but staying in the same place. It's what they call the red queen problem, where you fundamentally, if you stop running, then you move backwards because the software degrades at such a fast speed.
That's a scary place to be. I've actually been a VP of engineering and have felt that before, where it's, okay, we're adding more engineers. We have this debt. I'm not sure that we're moving any faster. It feels like we're moving slower. Something is wrong. I read the report. It's actually a really cool report. You break down these different, I think you have the high priority, which was developer turnover causes technical debt. Too many languages, right? People are using different programming languages or technology. There's so many out there. I'm trying to think of I think that the level down below that was architectural decisions obviously can cause technical debt.
And compromising on defect and having substandard solutions and releasing substandard solutions because you need to meet the deadlines.
Yeah, of course. I have CEO. So Paulo comes to you, you're the VP of engineering, and says, we have a $5 million deal, but they'll only sign the deal if you can do this new feature 2 weeks from now. Can you do it? Well, you can't really say no as a VP of engineering. Oh, okay. What are we going to do to make it happen?
No, absolutely. And we had a big insurance company that had a similar problem like that, but it was tougher. They had this underwriter workbench portal built in OutSystems, and the regulator came up with a new rule where they had to actually break down. It was a pretty complex change because it involved the way you calculate the premiums and whatever. So it was pretty complex. And they said, and suddenly they put them a date of about 6 weeks. So the guys were like, oh my God, we have to shut off the business because they did an external evaluation of the cost of the change, and it was about $6 months to make a minimal change for that. But fortunately, the team just got the change. The team that was working on OutSystems got the change, and they actually did the change in 2 weeks. So they actually released that big change, all tested and everything, 4 weeks ahead of the milestone.
Wow.
This was in that particular insurance company. That's when we went big, because suddenly you got the real case of why speed with quality, right?
You need the quality.
Can actually make a difference for the business.
I haven't used OutSystems to be fair, but if I was using OutSystems, like how does it address this technical debt problem? Is there something that, can you explain it?
Yeah. Absolutely. So if you take the anatomy of technical debt, it's reflected actually in the survey. One of the top issues related to developer attrition. Because if you look into technical debt, is the compound cost of the next change, of future changes, right? Until a point where the cost of the change becomes infinite and the system freezes. And that's where we see in a lot of companies, is frozen systems, no one touches, because no one dares to make a change and break everything. And the reason for that is that there's a huge cost in understanding what's there so that you can make a change that's reliable. And so developer knowledge transfer becomes an issue. Definitely, and that's one of the fundamental things. We actually stumbled on this solution accidentally. We weren't that smart because we had a visual language. Yeah, because we had the visual language, and we actually a system of 11. We did a benchmark several times, but a system of about 10 million lines of transform into an OutSystems system of about 3,000 objects. It's very different to track the dependencies of 11 million classes, and not 10 million classes, but thousands, hundreds of thousands of classes, objects, and whatever, compared with 3,000 objects. And so in OutSystems, we actually realized that you can lose all your developers and everyone can reverse engineer the solution and make changes. And because the platform gives you guardrails for you to make changes reliably.
Yeah, so I think attrition, I'm not always predicting the future here, but I think it's going to increase. I'm a remote engineer now. I can work anywhere in the world. I can go to any company that I want. There's going to be more recruiters pinging me on LinkedIn. My opportunity has increased.
Correct.
Yeah.
And not only that, but the problem also in the enterprise, we're not talking about like really sexy product groups. We're talking about the rest of us. We have a lot of difficulty in you hire like a top developer to be able to build a guy that really understands Android, and he builds you a mobile app for Android. And then you got the guy that really understands Swift and iOS, and he builds you that. Then you get a back office, and you get 3 bodies of code, and you're building this highly sophisticated mobile app. After a while, it becomes, you start getting into toil, into waste, into doing things that are not cool, which is maintaining,
boring,
releasing performance, doing boring stuff. And these guys have 5 offers on the table. They have extra jobs. 1 hour later, they have a new job. And so the attrition rate, when you start forcing these developers to go into maintenance mode, is huge. And so what these platforms, what we believe is going to be the future of these platforms, that we already do a lot of this, is we actually automate a lot of the maintenance process moving forward, so that we take away the toil, the waste, that plagues, that really makes the job of a developer actually pretty unexciting when we look into it. Because a lot of innovation portion of it is a very small portion of your life. And so we want to increase that that portion where you're actually delivering cool stuff and people are clapping and being happy with you, instead of just wait and say no, which is what most of the IT guys and digital teams have to say to the business or to product owners. Is, well, it's going to take time. That capacity to then be able to now deliver very quickly. It's something that we've seen transform cultures in IT departments, for instance, that have large development teams.
That's awesome. I actually had Hiram and Titus Winters from Google on the pod a few episodes back, and they made a similar or adjacent point. Your best engineers are your most innovative engineers. You don't want them really spending time on technical debt. That's not where you want them to be. It's okay, let's do this as fast as possible, but use your brain power on innovation. That's what you want to do. And I think you're saying something similar.
I'm saying one extra thing, because at Google, everyone is so smart that they don't really have a comparative method. But we work with a lot of companies that have great companies that are made out of people that are smart, but they have different backgrounds and they probably have skill sets that are not up to par with some of the things they're trying to do. What we found is that if you put a particular type of culture and a particular type of collection of tools in the hands of these guys, innovation actually occurs at about 80% of the enterprise, on any enterprise. We've seen government bodies that were completely frozen suddenly became highly innovative just because they could, just because it was possible. So innovation is actually almost harnessed inside the brain of the normal human being. It's just that context becomes a very stifling constraint in a lot of cases.
Very well said. What's coming next for OutSystems? What's the future here?
We actually see a tremendous uptake into increasingly automations of the development process. We see more and more companies starting up, wanting to create something very quickly and evolving it. And the market is just becoming more dynamic. And all of these are innovative processes. And so everyone is becoming more innovative, and they don't have the capacity to hire top guys to assemble 100,000 tools and understand processes. And so we see a huge uptake. We're seeing already, of course, but we see an increasing growth and mainstream explosion of usage of our platform.
That's awesome. This has been a really cool conversation. Paulo, thank you so much for taking us through your journey from being an engineer to an incredible entrepreneur and billion-dollar company CEO. It was really good having you on.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Dan. And thank you very much for the channel. It's a great channel with a lot of great content, and the audience is fantastic.
Absolutely. We talked a bit about technical debt, and I mentioned the report. I think it's a really great report. I read it over and had some nice takeaways there. We'll post it in the description below. A quick reminder for our listeners, if you haven't already rated and reviewed the show on your podcasting app, please do. Reviews are super crucial for getting Dev Interrupted discovered. Also be sure to join the Dev Interrupted Discord community. That's where we keep this type of conversation going all week long. I also wanted to say thank you to the more than 1,000 of you who are now subscribed to our weekly interruption newsletter. We bring you articles from the community, inside information, and weekly podcasts, and the first look at our upcoming Interact conference. Paulo, thank you again for coming on. Really appreciate you.
No, it was a pleasure being here, Dan. Thank you very much.